Welcome back to India Tonight. My guest is the well-known Pakistani editor, the editor of the Daily Times and the Friday Times, Najam Sethi. So does that also mean that it will never be possible?
No, the thing is that the Punjab government has problems with the federal government. So the Punjab government is not really cooperating with the federal government.
So it means that it's not the reluctance of the federal government and the PPP that is the problem. The reluctance of the PMLN is the problem.
Reluctance of the PMLN is the problem, and the military establishment is not entirely clear in its own mind in terms of what sort of clampdown it wants to follow through with as far as the Lashkar is
It's interesting you should say that the military establishment itself is not clear in its mind, because as long ago as January, in an interview to Der Spiegel, General Shuja Pasha, the head of the ISI, had accepted that clearly the big problem was in fact extremism and militancy in Pakistan, not India. Then later on, General Kayani himself has accepted that at the moment the bigger problem is militancy. But you're saying that despite these remarks by these two top men,
no, what
the establishment
I'm saying
is of a different mind.
No, what they said was correct. They're talking about Talibanization or Taliban militants who are attacking the security forces. The Lashkar is not doing anything of the sort. The Lashkar's front is actually doing good social work in the affected areas. They are running camps, they are providing relief and so on and so forth. So the Lashkar is not an internal threat. That's the point.
But it is a threat to India.
That's what India says. And India has to provide the evidence for that.
But at the moment, elements of the military establishment perceive the Lashkar as an organization that does good social work in Pakistan, not as a threat to India.
Well, I mean, I think, again, as I said, it's a twilight zone, what the Lashkar does and what it doesn't do. We now know that there are elements of the Lashkar, whether they were splinter groups or whether they were breakaway factions, who were involved in the Mumbai thing. And some of them have been hauled up by Rehman Malik.
In fact, in an interview that he gave me on Sunday, General Musharraf went one step further. He admitted, as far as I know, for the very first time, individuals, as he called them, within the army and the ISI, and he named both those organizations, are sympathetic to the LET and Jaish, and he says that they need to be severely punished. But is he a lone voice accepting this? Would there be people in the establishment who would accept the same thing too?
I think President Zardari is very keen on it. And if Musharraf is keen on it, I would imagine he reflects a particular point of view in the Pakistani army as well, which is good. Having said that, it's not the easiest thing in the world to go after an organization like the Lashkar, which technically doesn't exist.
Quite right, and particularly when the army establishment's not united, and particularly when the PMLN in Punjab is an obstacle.
If it's not an obstacle, it's certainly not on board.
So India ought to be more understanding of the fact that President Zardari is actually caught between reluctance from some elements of the army and the ISI and reluctance by the PMLN. And he has to battle both of them to deliver for India.
Absolutely, because Zardari has really gone the extra mile in terms of trying to build this process of peace with India and crack down on terrorism of all kinds. But it's not easy for him to do so.
I hope there are people who are hearing that particular interpretation, because it is a new and novel one in India to have President Zardari presented as a man who wants to do everything to help India, but is checked on the one hand by the army and on the other hand by his so-called alleged allies, the PMLN. Najam Sethi, let's talk about Sharm el-Sheikh. As you know, that particular agreement has created a storm of controversy in Delhi. And in particular, the sentence that is attracting most criticism is the one that delinks action on terror from the composite dialogue. It says that the two should not be bracketed. In India, that's viewed as a huge retreat by the Indian government. How is it perceived in Pakistan?
It's much the same way. This is the irony of it. And, you know, the Pakistanis seem to think that this is a great concession that we've made to India, because it will allow India to put pressure on Pakistan to act on terrorism without necessarily derailing the process. Now,
okay, can I interrupt? So, just for the audience, I want to clarify that the same sentence is viewed in Pakistan exactly diametrically opposite to the way it's viewed in India.
Absolutely.
It's seen as a concession to India, not a gain by Pakistan.
Absolutely. And, you know, the interesting thing is, my own take on this is that this is frankly, a great advance for both countries. First of all, it enables Pakistan to proceed against those 5 Lashkar people who have been arrested and to move against them. And I think the current situation is highly conducive for that in terms of the confession by Kasab. Because this confession can now be used in a Pakistani court, unless he retracts from it, to push for a case against the people that the Pakistanis have arrested. So I think this is very important, and I dare say there may have been some understanding on this issue as well. Because without this confession, it would have been difficult to prosecute the people that Pakistan has now arrested.
But you're also suggesting something else, that that sentence which which has attracted so much criticism in India, was deliberately crafted the way it was, so that both sides could interpret the same words almost in an opposite direction.
Absolutely.
And both feel
Absolutely.
they've got something out of it.
Absolutely. That's exactly my take on it. I think both have benefited from this, and I think you'll see the results will prove that this particular formulation was correct.
And the interesting thing is that in both countries, if what you're saying is correct, and I have no reason to doubt it, the press are critical of the government, because the press in Pakistan sides with the Indian government's interpretation and the press in India sides with the Pakistan government's interpretation.
You see, especially because your Prime Minister then subsequently came back and gave a statement which seemed to contradict the spirit of this particular statement.
And the press in Pakistan has
And the press in
that.
Pakistan basically picked that up and put that as the headline. So you know, the thing is, in Pakistan people think that you're, you know, still putting preconditions.
Which means that Prime Minister Gilani is as much embarrassed or criticized by the press for Sharm el-Sheikh as Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is embarrassed and criticized in India.
Yeah, I think, but the difference, of course, is that Pakistan is happy that both sides have agreed that the secretaries will meet at some stage and the process will move forward.
Except that it's not composite dialogue, it's some other process.
Yes. You know, just as Kashmir is now, you know, consigned to the back channel, it's no longer really part of the composite dialogue. I think terrorism is also probably going to acquire a similar dimension.
So how do people in Pakistan respond to the fact that there is no mention of Jammu and Kashmir by name in that statement? Has that been another focus of criticism in Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, the way you seem to think that, you know, by not putting a precondition on terrorism, the Pakistanis say, well, where is Kashmir? So I think my own assessment is that both these issues are going to go into the back channel, which is just as well, because they're very sensitive.
So both terrorism and Jammu and Kashmir will slip into the back channel, in other words, clearing the way for the rest of the dialogue on other subjects to proceed.
That's my take on it.
What about the fact that suddenly, for the very first time in the 60-year history of the two countries, there is a sentence about Baluchistan and other unspecified areas? How is that viewed in Pakistan? Because in India, it's seen as, again, a terrible concession, setting an awful precedent, and here people say, each time now India raises Kashmir, Pakistan will counter with Baluchistan. How's that viewed in your country?
I think that there's a distinction ought to be made. Pakistan has been talking about the Indian hand in Balochistan for a long time. India has stopped talking of the Pakistani hand in Kashmir now for a long time. So there is this difference, number one. Number two, Kashmir is already, we know how much progress has taken place, and I dare say it's been in line with Indian aspirations on how to settle Kashmir rather than on Pakistan, and Musharraf is largely responsible for that, and I don't think there's going to be any backtracking on that from the Pakistani side. Balochistan is very important because Balochistan is where the other proxy war is taking place, Afghanistan and Balochistan. So I think it's important that we put all our cards on the table. Kashmir, in a sense, is no longer on the table. It's being sorted out.
It's very interesting, the words you use. It's important that we put our cards on the table. Do you see that sentence on Baluchistan simply as putting cards on the table so that both sides as adults and mature people can discuss it, or do you see it as an Indian concession?
No, it isn't an Indian concession. This is the sort of thing that we need to do. Whatever problems there are, we need to put them on the table and we need to sort them out. The Pakistanis have evidence of an Indian hand in Kashmir, and this is in Balochistan, and this is nothing new. This is an old thing that continues to come up now and then, every time there's a resistance in Balochistan. Similarly, you know, some of the Taliban, there is a suspicion in the Pakistani military that some of these Taliban elements have also been fed by the Indians. You know, the India bleeds Pakistan, paying it back for Pakistan's having bled India all these years. So you're saying put it on the table and discuss it and then get it over with. Absolutely. And I think the Americans are also keen that, you know, put all your cards on the table, discuss them, sort them out, get rid of these proxy wars, and then let's talk about Afghanistan.
One last question. The Pakistani newspaper The Dawn claims that Pakistan gave India a dossier alleging Indian interference and evidence of Indian interference in Baluchistan and other areas. The Indians are letting it be known, although they haven't said it officially, that no such dossier was given. This is a figment of Dawn's imagination. Very quickly, do you have any information about that?
No, I don't have any information, but I do know that the Pakistanis had made a dossier on Balochistan. Whether they actually handed it over to the Indians or showed it to them and the Indians said, we'll look at it. Whether that was formal, not formal, whether it was in the form of a non-paper or not, I don't know that.
But there is a dossier that Pakistan has.
Absolutely.
We don't know if it was shared.
I just want to say one small thing. I interviewed some of the Baloch leaders who were part of this insurgency. and they've said openly on record that they will take assistance from India even if the devil gives them money and weapons, they will do so. And on record, on television, on my channel, they've said that if India helps us, we'll take the help.
All right, which of course underlines Pakistani suspicions, although it doesn't necessarily prove that there is Indian help.
Absolutely.
Najam Sethi, thank you very much for coming and explaining the situation in Pakistan and interpreting your country's politics, and in particular the fight against the Mumbai accused for an Indian audience. That was Najam Sethi, one of Pakistan's best-known editors, helping us understand the situation in his country. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.